starting now. Let's get the stream up, that would help. Okay. All looking good. So, as y'all probably know by now, the study group project for the next 2 weeks is going to be to dissect a brutalist, specifically a brutalist style piece of architecture, be it a building or a sculpture or an interior even is fine, and deconstruct it, look at its perspective components, and then based on what you learned from that.
Pet, I just want to ask real quick, how long is this one going on? Because I can delay the figure drawing class if people wanted to participate in that until later.
I have no idea. But this one's kind of like a one-off, so, and it's pretty introductory, so essentials.
Okay. Would it be done in an hour, or are you going to be going for more?
I'd like to be done in about an hour and a half. You don't have to.
Okay. Well, I'll start the figure drawing session, and then people can just walk in.
Yeah, absolutely.
After they get it done with the study group, I'll probably extend the study group. I'll probably extend the figure drawing a little bit longer than normal too.
Okay. Sorry for the scheduling conflict.
Yeah, I think we need to make a spreadsheet that all of us mods and people who are scheduling the quote unquote official study group stuff
this
use.
Isn't
anyone can set up their own little mini study group or whatever they want, but I think we need some kind of way to coordinate in the future. I want to do that too, because then we can commit to regular classes also.
Google Sheets might work.
May I make a suggestion?
We'll figure it out.
Run.
For now, I don't.
Alright, cool. Never mind.
Is it? Okay, yeah.
What? Anyway, that's all.
Okay, thank you very much. So we're deconstructing this. We're reconstructing it in the raw, the building that we choose. So over here you can see I already have a couple of demonstrations to sort of show you what I think of when I think of deconstructing the perspective of a building like this. It's just finding the lines, like the horizon lines, the vanishing points, and then knowing which lines adhere to them and which don't, what you can have and what you don't necessarily need, like third point perspective, and then some weird exceptions to that rule, because you can see in this photograph here of this lovely brutalist piece. Can anyone tell me just from the start how many vanishing points there are, or if there's anyone here who doesn't know what the fuck a vanishing point is?
Are there 3?
2.
Does anyone here not know what a vanishing point is? I need to check that.
I
don't know what that is.
Okay.
I would guess 3.
Real quick.
Just, sorry, before you go on, sorry to cut in. There's people asking in the chat if you could lower the opacity of the photos.
Oh, yeah, sure, I guess.
Just to make it a little clearer.
Got it. Thank you. There you go. So vanishing points. Yeah, let's go over the absolute bare necessities for perspective drawing. So perspective drawing is about breaking down the world into digestible, very simplified, and truly at the core of it, abstracted forms. We're kind of it's a skill about knowing how to lie, essentially how to create illusions, like the illusion of correctness, in a scene, or realism in a scene, but like the actual execution is definitely not at all like how our eyes work or how we perceive the world. It's a convenient approximation. So when we are talking about like horizon lines, vanishing points, these things don't naturally exist anywhere. These are just tools of like tools in artistry, just like line width or you know, hatching or whatever. Yeah. So when you're dealing with perspective, you have like a horizon line that is what sets the more or less the height of the composition. So in a picture plane, like so, if this is my canvas, setting the horizon where I have it right now, it means that it's like my line of sight is basically perfectly, 50-50 sky and ground, or what have you, whatever the environment is. If I, oh shit, I'm not on a vector layer. If we place it higher, then most of the image is going to be, or the composition is going to be handled like below your viewpoint. So this is what your eye level is, or the eye level of the observer, and then whatever the object is down here. So you're looking down at the object in this case, and if it's above the horizon line, you're going to be looking up at it. All of this is on the wrong layer. So, when we're constructing in perspective, we typically stick to either 1 or 2 or 3 point perspective. So 1 point is where you have a horizon line, and you only have what's called a vanishing point, a single vanishing point, V1. And this is what everything in the scene, all of your objects, are lining up with the edges of, if they are perfectly sideways, or if you're kind of going for like a orthographic kind of thing. Because now I'm tempted to draw to the second point over here, but if we're sticking with single point, then we don't have anything else. We just have, I guess in this case, perfectly parallel lines.
Nice.
Get rid of the guides. And you have a box in 1 point perspective over here. This is, I guess, like it's easiest to think of 1 point perspective in terms of like being inside of a room. So we can draw a quick little room. It can get a little overwhelming to keep track of everything, but it's a very formulaic process. So if you lose track of where you are, and you've kept everything organized, at least you've put down the lines where they ought to be, then it's really just a matter of retracing your steps, and you should be able to get right back on track. If not, then that could be a sign that there's something wrong in the comp. Get rid of these. And here we have an empty room. Pause over here. maybe there's like ceiling boards. They all go to the same vanishing point if they are lined up with it. If they're free floating, so like right now, like what I mean by that is, if like free floating is if you have like an object inside of this room, like let's just say, like for the sake of simplicity, like a square on the ground, that's going to line up with the 1 point. As soon as you say turn that square somewhere else, this is introducing another vanishing point. It still goes to the same horizon point, but this object goes to a different one. Each object has its own set of vanishing points. If it's like free, if it's in free flow from like relative to other objects, if it's spun differently than another, or rotated differently than the objects around it. And this gets into, as soon as you go to 3/4 like this, like I have that second square drawn out on the floor, this is introducing a second point as well. So it's not just this vanishing point, now V2. Now it's a third vanishing point up here. Wait, oh, that's not connecting to the horizon line, so we got to draw that out a little bit further. You will probably end up having to go off canvas, depending on what your focal length is, basically. That's a bit later. But then you have like V3 over here. So V1, 2, and 3. This is now technically a 3-point perspective grid, but like what people usually refer to when they say 3-point is where you have, let's make it a scene where we're looking down. We have the horizon line, we have our V1, we have our V2, and then right down the middle, let's say, doesn't have to be the middle, but down the middle, we have a third dimensional vanishing point, V3. So 2-point perspective, as we went over up here, is essentially, it's just, if you want to make a cube in space, you're just lining up with these two vanishing points, all of the edges. And then when we get to the vertical axes of the object, now we're going to use V3 to establish the outsides of that box. Get rid of the guides, and you can more easily see it's kind of like we're looking down at a building or something, or we've got a very high viewpoint to the object, whatever it may be. We're looking down at it from a pretty dramatic angle. This works great until you start running into like the challenge of let's see. So if we narrow the distance between your vanishing points, matters quite a bit. If the distance is too narrow, let's make 3 way down there. That's in turn going to make your viewpoint quite a bit more extreme. Let's find the height of the box. Let's say the height of the box is this, right there. And then there is some fancy footwork you do to get a perfect square, but for now. Fuck, I didn't quite do it. You know what? I'm going to cheat right now. Just everyone, just shush. So I don't have to redraw it. I'm going to cheat. I'm going to pull this down. So you can more easily see it here. When this exceeds a 90-degree angle, 90-degree angle, which it is, it's greater than 90 degrees here, or it's less than 90 degrees, on the inside at least. We start running into distortions that can tend to like throw the comp off, throw the visual integrity of the object, start making it look all wonky. This is kind of the whole point behind sort of doing like a fisheye lens view. You're actually kind of going for pretty severe distortions, or when you're trying to depict like the reflections on a sphere. Using perspective, those are all going to be done via distortion. So, how are we? All right, how are we feeling on vanishing points and horizon lines? Feeling better, chat?
Much better. Much better.
Okay. All right.
Much better.
So, for the purpose of this project, we're using Brutalist Architecture specifically. I'll talk about this real quick. Brutalist Architecture is very blocky. It's not all blocky. There are some pretty funky, like rounded pieces or examples, but it's known for being pretty like chunky, geometric, and kind of like following to the T that like they're great examples in perspective perception, as and when you're selecting the images for the project, you're going to run into a number of perspective types, just as we discussed earlier. You're going to have examples of 2-point, here, here, here. This is actually kind of 3 points because you notice we have this odd angle here for the shape. It's not a perfect square, so how do we get that? Well, how do we get that regular? We follow those edges up. We find a convergence point up here, and then we realize, oh, look at that. This whole building is just it's like a triangle at the front. This would be like an elongated pyramid or whatever. But then to get, we're missing this back line, right? And we could guess, but we don't have to. We can actually infer. And it's better to do so because then at least if you make the attempt at inferring instead of guessing, you run a much decreased chance of screwing up your lines or screwing up your perspective setup. So to get that angle of like this ultimate corner, so we can figure out what this back line is, we're going to first find the horizon line by taking, see all these edges here that seem to go out to their vanishing points here. We're going to drag a line out from the corners, following that edge, careful as we can. I'm going to do that for all of the obvious primary lines that are making up the building here. This is going pretty rough, but you can see right here, we have what looks to be the horizon line, and this line is probably off a little bit, so it's pretty comfortably right there. Let's get rid of that line. So this is our V1. We could infer that, like, if we were absolutely certain that this photograph were perfectly level, we could just draw, like, shift-click a perfectly straight line across the canvas. if we know that it is perfectly level. If it's tilted, we need more information. So we're going to take these edges, and I know that I already did this one early, so I know for a fact this horizon line is quite far out. Take this one too, matching it up with this right here, sort of what we see of the end of that line. Pull it out as far as we can. That's off. We can kind of, it gets Thompson right there. And then this middle one's pretty much, you see, it wasn't enough. I'm ending somewhere. It's pull these out even further. About right here. This is our V2. So then once we have these, we just shift click between each of the vanishing points, and that gives us our horizon line, which is this right here. I'll do it in blue. That's your horizon line. Let's turn down the opacity on this. Clear blue. Yeah. So now that we have the horizon line, we can, and the two vanishing points, we can just let loose. We can fill in all the details. Oh, right, but we want that back line. So we have the vanishing point 1 and 2. We have this point of convergence up here. I'm going to draw it in yellow. And all we do then to find the angle of that like meeting point or whatever, it's like just do that. Go down to the vanishing point here to figure out like what that angle is. If this shape continued all the way up and met there, this would be the roof line. So if you're doing a house, just a good old-fashioned little house, this would be the process of discerning, like, wow, what the fuck? Steeple or whatever. This line, this roof line. It's not how it would be because this is too freaking low. But hopefully you get the point. I'm not constructing it in perspective. That's the whole problem. We're doing freehanded. All right, so that gives us this other convergence point. That lines up with this edge here. We don't have a point down here to go to. So we need to find the approximate footprint of this whole building's sort of structure. And we know it's very cubic, so it's probably just going to be a box. The way we can find that out is by finding this corner, and this corner, and then drawing the perspective lines to that perspective thing. This is above the horizon line, so, but this is going to be that back edge. So actually, let me do this in, let's do this in green. Green stands for the edges that we don't see. Remember that. We could just run parallel to this line, but if we're dealing in in 3-point, then this line and this line are actually going to converge somewhere over here. But if we're just approximating and the line is that far away, or if the vanishing point for that is that far away, you can usually just get away by guessing at this point, because you have the approximate placement of this point. You have the ridge line. Like, this is in space going to be at the right area back here. Actually, kind of use that. Maybe. Shoot. See, every once in a while I have to think. Like, okay, where is everything? But you just trace your steps. And you eventually get back on track. Let's say this actually probably comes out to about here. How did I do it over here? I just need to draw this, like, like earlier. It's just a square on the floor. It's just this. And you have to figure out this corner. This back corner. Oh, yeah, of course. Derp. See, I knew it. So we use Vanishing Point 2. And we come to the corner of the building right here. That gives us the very backmost edge of the building. And we take this line and we go back here, like we did before. It's the fence line, but it's not lining up. Oh, I see why. So if you look at the photograph, I have it placed wrong. I have it placed like, oh boy. This corner of the building is that's not actually the corner of the building. This is an elevated walkway that's obscuring the corner of the building over here. So we don't actually have a visual on that one either. So instead, we're going to use this, because I can see that. Green is now just the new outline for the building. Sorry, this is getting confusing with the color coding. We have the back corner here, and that'd be this one. Come back to V2. Now that's going to be the back corner. Very confident this time. And it comes here. Now we have our back corner. Kind of confused me for a second. We're actually looking up at this object because it's above the horizon line, but this would be the bottom of that plane. You can imagine that. So that's the footprint. From there, it's about matching the other objects in the scene to the vanishing points. So we get that elevated area. Things get really confusing because now there's all these colors going on. But this is just the dissection phase. Once you've gone through the lot of it and you've got everything like carefully lined up, you'll end up with something like this. And the goal of this, to me at least, to say it like I'm ready, I get the point of this structure, is when when I know that's I've gotten it, is when I can get rid of the reference and it reads. I have enough information here to base a new original to work with on my own. I don't need the reference because all of the perspective information is in the drawing already. I can infer where I'm not even inferring. This one, I've erased away the vanishing points, but I'd still have the horizon line and the two vanishing points, and I'd be because everything else is in here too. You're able to reference other parts of the building, so there's always like once you're here, once you have your horizon and vanishing point, horizon line and vanishing point information, and any other extra convergence points, then you're ready to move on to the next part, which is constructing it from scratch. And all you're doing then is just sort of doing this in reverse. You're starting with the horizon line. You're let's see. So I'm demonstrating. You're starting with the horizon line. You're giving it the 2 vanishing points, or 1, depending on how confident you are. For this project, you can actually select between any like I don't really care. I think you can pick whatever like level of difficulty I'd say you want. If you're feeling confident, I'd say go for 2-point perspective. If you want to make sure you have your understanding of it really nailed down, then I'd recommend sticking with 1-point perspective. You can still find plenty of examples of 1-point brutalist architecture perspective to be used as reference. This is one right here. I've already found the our V1. That's also going to be our horizon line. You can even see it back here in the background of that image. It's about right. Feels right. And then the third part in the second week is going to be about adding things to it. So any cuts to the building, or building one from completely from scratch. If you're going with 1 point, I do expect to see extra info, like the perspective of extruded or carved elements. So this roof line, you want that. You want to make sure they look like cut into the thing, or extruded. Either way. And you have this interior. Oh, just threw my stylus. This interior window. This window that's been inset here. And this balcony here. And I'm just tracing, but I'm tracing while adhering to the perspective of the grid. That's all this first exercise is. We're not trying to make anything pretty. We're just trying to dissect the pictures we've chosen. But yeah, when you're selecting, when you're selecting, keep an eye out for how many vanishing points an object might have. As you can see, this one is particularly complicated because of the convergence point. Even though it looks kind of simple, there's a lot going on. There's also these vertical lines in the windows. There's cutaways in here. All of these they look like they're gonna actually line up with the same line as the yellow over here. Yeah, they'll eventually get up to here for additional points of convergence. So this line becomes kind of critical. This roof line. 2-point can sometimes be kind of sneaky. This looks like it could just be a 1-point perspective situation. Let's get rid of that. So there's our V1. But actually, when we go in here and look at the the balconies, see these examples of these tiny hints at another vanishing point. And these are tricky to get accurate because you don't get a whole lot of information per line. So you only get this much info to base the entire line off of. What would probably suit me best here is to actually find one that's way down here, almost at the bottom level, and then go way up here where the angle is much more dramatic. And pull from that. But that's not it either, depending on how far you want to take it. The V is going to be way over here. V2 is going to be way over here. There's also the lighting. You have, for like shadows adhere to perspective, absolutely. There's a big, bright, beautiful sun somewhere up here. It's casting these shadows. It's coming down. It's hitting the edges of the things, and it's gonna, all of these shadows. Now, it's important to remember the sun is a very big thing, very, very far away. Very, very big light source from very, very far away. If you place your sun's like vanishing point too closely to the thing, I don't even know. I don't even think you should have a vanishing point for the sun. No, I don't think you do. This is actually getting to the limits of my own understanding of perspective, if I'm going to be completely honest. This is the chapter in Scott Robertson's How to Draw Drawing and Sketching Objects, Environments, or Your Imagination. This is the chapter I'm kind of stuck on, and kind of intimidated by. Is you're set, like, once you introduce lighting, you're setting up planes, you're cutting objects. I don't want to. This is so tangential. You don't need to do this. You definitely don't need to do the lighting if you don't want to. If anything else I've already talked about is kind of like been enough, then yeah, that's enough. So, do we have any questions so far? Just kind of thinking that might be the tail end of.
I have one.
Yeah.
You see the building picture you were just working on. You see the little thing on top of it, like the very top thing. Why not just like use that part to determine the second thing?
Yeah, I should have absolutely done that. Absolutely. What's going on here? Yeah, okay. So let's view one that is anomalous. That's right.
I got a question as well.
Please.
When you are drawing from life, how would you make sure that, like when I draw from life, my perspective kind of gets fucked up after a while because I start to draw some things bigger and some things smaller. How would you be able to, I guess, like what is going through your brain when you're observing things regarding perspective? Are you also what I personally do is kind of try to visualize how the shapes are put in, but I feel like I should apply perspective as well, so I guess opinions of other people would help to learn how to observe better.
What's your
when drawing?
I don't quite understand.
How would you approach perspective when drawing from life, essentially?
So if I'm drawing
because
from
that's
life,
a totally different. Yeah, because that's a totally different subject. Because even a small step can change your entire perspective.
It's changing the angle of your head can change the settings you have for the scene. So I don't know how deep I want to go into this because it's a very different setup than dissecting an image or We're kind of drawing from imagination, of course, and it would actually be a really good thing to investigate independently, if that's something you're interested in.
I totally am.
Yeah, so for still lives in the past, what I've done is you start with the horizon line and the vanishing points, or rather, you start with your horizon line, and then you say, so if I just have an object, fuck, you know what? I'm going to draw something in my room right now. I'm going to draw this block of wood that I have. We're going to start with the horizon line, which is about twice the object's height. I'm going to say that's the scale of my object right there. And that this is the horizon line. I'm going to try to find the angle of one of the edges. And the way I'm doing this is by taking my pencil, or my stylus in this case, and I'm lining up the edge of my stylus with the edge of the object in the air. Then I'm locking my arm and I'm taking it over to where I've placed the corner that's here. Get what I'm saying, or am I?
Yeah, I can kind of visualize it. You kind of use your stylus as a ruler, or your pen.
Exactly, and that gives me this angle approximately. So that's where I get V1. That angle, where this angle meets the horizon line, that's where you get your first vanishing point. The second vanishing point is going to be so fucking far off the canvas in this instance that I'm just going to work with a loose approximation. I'm looking down at it. It's going to be like, it's way over there. I'm probably just going to use parallel lines for this one. Which is fine if it's an extreme, unless like your goal is to like be as literally accurate as possible, but then you're going to need a lot of canvas space for the drawing. So that gives me the first top two. This is more or less a parallel line to the top one. I already have vanishing point 1, so that goes up there. Vanishing point 2 is going to be way over there. And actually, now that I've made the decision that they're just going to be parallel lines, this whole thing, I now just need to find the length of this little block of wood, based on like these lines here, because finding where this edge is going to give me the connecting point to V1, and then all I need is to find the depth of this. Say I get this, do the parallel line, and then a vertical line for the back edge. And there you see I already have my cube. And it is with that. With every object, it's just you treat certain objects differently. Most of it comes down to like finding squares and shit. Even ellipses. Let me do ellipses real quick. So if you're going to draw a coffee cup or something, here's how we do an ellipse. V1, it changes sides sometimes. V1, V2. This one's going to be imaginary. Just going to draw out not do it like perfectly centered like that. Let's go off like this, off centered. Gonna say this is like the length of it. Go to V2 here. V1. I think there's also like a, can we do that? No, okay. You want to get your just like the rough size of the ellipse that you're drawing. You're gonna want that in a square, a two-dimensional square, flat square. and then you're gonna find the median points of each of the line segments. So we want these. The way we get them accurately is by drawing an X across the points of the square. And then we take the inside of that X and we go to the vanishing points. That gives us the perfectly centered, the actual center of the line segments. And once I have those, I can just come back across here, and I have all of those little line segments there. To get the ellipse, all we're doing now is so it's kind of sketchy at this point, and like there's lots of exercises you can do to get better at drawing like ellipses in space. The idea though here is we're just going from these points, and we want to stay inside of the square. So we start with like, that's kind of like the angle of the ellipse there, kind of curves around. It's that angle. All of these are going to kind of be perpendicular to where it is right there. And there you have your imaginary ellipse. From there, okay, if we want to draw a cylinder from here, or let's start actually with a, you're not going to find this a lot in Brutalism. I've seen one example, but like a cone. We have the center of our object. To get the cone, let's draw a box. Let's go with a very, like, well, now let's take this corner of the ellipse here. Let's go as vertical as we can. This could be a third point perspective, so you might sometimes have like one down here, let's say, another one, and then in which case, you know, these lines are going to be more like so. Well, yeah. Anyway, all right. Yeah. So we're going above it. So that's I'm gonna say that's where the edge is gonna, the corner is gonna be. It'd be 1. It gives us this point. Maybe 2. Take this one. We do the vertical. Just that point. From here. Boom. From here. Boom. That gives us this point. So now we have another square up here. Let's do the same thing. Let's do the X. Gives us the center of that X, or that square. We draw a line down to the center of the ellipse down here. And then we come from the corners, the visual like edges of what this cube is, or the cone is going to be. We connect with that point. It's a wonky little gnome hat, but there you go. Probably wrong, but like the best that I know. It's also getting distorted because we're coming really. I think we're over that 90-degree angle. So this is exactly the kind of like distortion that I was talking about. This kind of like this being like way too low visually, and this being like so like a weird offset to everything. And then also the fact that I'm not dealing with the third point down here. If I had a third point, this line would be something probably more like that. Get a cone that probably look more like so. Get rid of the back line there. There you go. There's the cone. To get a cylinder. Wait. I think I deleted that layer. to get a cylinder, it's the same process, but we do another ellipse up there in the box. Someone need to ask a question? Someone on mic? Hello? No? Okay.
Actually, I have one question. I just remembered. I was gonna say it at the time. Is it still okay to ask?
Yeah, sure.
Alright, so I seem to notice the square that you drew at the bottom. Like you've managed to cut it in half and like find the midpoint perfectly. How did you measure that distance in perspective so well? Because I've sometimes tried to draw buildings with like windows being, spaced out equally, and it's been very difficult. For me, I don't understand a mathematical or sort of method or some way of doing that that is reliable to me, I believe.
I'll show you just 1 second, because that was a very challenging thing that I had to figure out for myself.
I feel like you have to really pick up that book, Scott Robinson's How to Draw, if you really want to be able to draw accurate windows and stuff like that.
Yeah, it does have the solution to what you're asking in it.
Because you're going to be multiplying planes and faces. There's a way you can just draw it straight out, but if you're going for industrial design and you want it to be spot on, then you have to like multiply the planes.
Yeah, but there is a specific means of constructing well-spaced features. But okay, here we have the approximate cylinder that's going above the horizon line and below. So you have that shift in perspective. You have a portion that's above, where you're looking up at it, and a portion below it, based on where that line is. So, okay, how do we get well-spaced? Let's go with arches as the example. Because that's what I was trying to figure out in my own little investigation. I think that was back in high school. So let's go to V2. Yeah, we got some Roman arches. Let's say you need a point of reference for the first one. So you do need to have raw measurements, like holding your thumb up against your stylus and measuring that relative to, and putting that literal measurement down on the paper. You need a starting point. Usually it's like this line is a good starting point. That gives you like the height of the object, and then you just base the height as you use the height as your point of reference, and then go use it's this long, so it would be you can use that segment to sort of gauge, maybe something is only half of that, maybe half that distance, and so that's where your next line lands. But you need that initial one. After you have that initial setup, once you have your horizon line and vanishing point information, and then the first segment of the object, let's say this, you have this wall section. What you're going to want to do to find the length of this one, because as you go down towards the horizon line, the vanishing point, excuse me. These segments, you may have seen this from like a study of tiles or something, but these segments will not stay the same length. They'll start to compress. They'll get closer and closer together as they're in perspective. The way to get that rate of halving or whatever, the way to get this distance without having to memorize a formula or anything, is to just use X's. This works with an even number of them. The limit of my knowledge is like I only know how to do this with like an even number of these segments, and this is why. So let's see. Let me think what I need. Okay, so I've drawn an X here. That gives me the center of this segment. Let's do like, just gonna do a vertical line there. And I'm actually gonna have to think my way through this instead of like being quite so vocal, so bear with me. Yes. Okay, so now we start with this middle line here, and we go through this one. So, boom. And already you can start to see there's a bit of shortening going on. Then you get the vertical. You get this again. Boom. Now we're starting to move down the thing slowly but surely. Let's start with the other one down here. Get the X for that. Boom. Now by now, I have my second segment. This is the second segment. I'm getting that just from using this and going straight through the reference lines that I have already. So let's do that again, going through this point to this point, and vertical, or your third point perspective. That could all, if it's down here, that would be this close. These lines would be something like this. But we're ignoring the third point, which is just fine. And let's see, that's a third segment. And a fourth segment. Each getting smaller and smaller. So that's how you get the accurate, true to your own grid. Maybe not true to life, and I'm not really sure what you do with an odd number of segments, but actually this should work with an odd number of segments. Yeah, I guess if one's halved, but yeah, then you just for like Roman arches, then you're just finding that ellipse. When you're looking at the top of the ellipse or like these odd ones, just remember that it's like at this point of the ellipse's elliptical, it's going to be paralleling the horizon line, so the vanishing, or the vanishing point line. So it's going to have that kind of angle of attack to it to start off. That's how you get. I hope those aren't chainsaws I hear outside. I'm sure it's not, but so that's kind of how you get your arches. Now you need a lot more reference lines to make sure it like looks three-dimensional and not just like a bunch of like 2D stuff. But yeah, does that help with your question?
It definitely does. That's actually very like I'm still kind of thinking like, why didn't I think of that?
It's super logical, right? It's kind of frustrating when it occurs to you, but like a lot of this stuff is as simple as that. Some of it gets kind of complicated with all of the stuff that's flying at you at once. But it's not as difficult as math, I would say, personally. It's a logic puzzle. Yeah, you just gotta learn the rules to the puzzle first. But then everything sort of solves itself.
I liked your way of how you multiplied planes, because in the Scott Robertson book, it's like you go to the top far left hand corner, and you're just supposed to like draw a straight line, and hopefully you're supposed to like hit the mark where it'll make like an exact mirror of
Sorry, was that you cut out? Oh dang, I guess he dropped. So ellipses are really, like, if you're just sketching from life, you may not want to go through the problem, or you also may not want to like dig into your sketchbook, like gouge your sketchbook with graphite lines. So, or you might run out of space on the page or whatever. It's fine to just approximate, especially for sketches. If you're doing ellipses in space, this is also like a really good warm-up. Like draw a line. That'll give you like the angle of the ellipse. And just try to match the angle. Let's see one actually like towards us. Shit like that. If you're having trouble going from like point to point, or having or making sure your ellipse is like look like they're curving right, point exercises are really good. So here I want to get a curve like that. It's pretty extreme. Let's go with this. Ghost it if you have to beforehand. Get used to the yeah, and that'll help like boost confidence with like freehand lines and everything. So you can also just do like this exercise where you go freehanded. You're just trying to go between the 2 points with a straight line as straight as possible, and you're only looking at this one. You start here and you go to that, but you're only ever looking at that point. The idea is to kind of get as accurate as possible without having to sketch your way to the line. You don't want to sketch in perspective. It just gets too freaking messy. Any other questions, by the way? Holy crap, this is a lot of people. Hey y'all, what's up? We have any questions from chat? Can someone be so kind as to be my little
I think I saw a question earlier about what to do when things are warped by a fisheye lens.
Okay.
Fun.
If this is a basics like intro, a real crash course into the bare necessities of building cubes in space, essentially. Don't try to do fisheye if you don't know how to do 2-point yet. They're definitely, it's all about like building up to being able to freehand all of this stuff, but you got to go through each stage. So I guess like I mean, if you're thinking about fisheye lens and that insanity, then you're all ready to go. with the project, basically, and that would be an excellent subject of personal investigation, something to like bring to the group too. I'd love to see that. So, but I don't know. I don't actually know how to construct things in fisheye lens. Like the like 2-point is my current limit. I don't deal in 3-point even that often, unless it's like a third point on the horizon line, the same one as the other two. I'm still learning like stuff that's like how to cast shadows, how to do this like roof lining thing that I was trying to do earlier. Find like the angle of a roof. This stuff's still pretty challenging for me. My own study is going to be directed towards cast shadows. I'm pretty sure for this one. And
could you,
yeah.
The one that I tried to break down with that, because it has a circle in there as well. I assume it's 3-point perspective, but I could be wrong.
In the chat?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Ju was the one that put it in there. No. Go up. Go. Yeah. That's that was my cheat sheet for how I did it. The one below it is pretty much a summary of. If you can check my lines, it was the one below. That image that you copied.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah. That one. I don't think it's right though.
Well, I'm kind of wondering why you have these here. You have a lot of... Oh, I see, because they're lining up with... Well, they're not. So these aren't actually... These aren't lining up with the corners here.
Well, I'm not going for accuracy. I'm kind of going for like a general, you know what I mean? Like a broad understanding of if I was thinking of that correctly.
It doesn't look like the grids are actually matched to the photo at all. I'm going to be kind of harsh there.
No, please destroy me.
Okay. The black lines here on the building, they are, but there's nothing like they don't go to a vanishing point. That vanishing point should be somewhere in here. If you're following that edge, and it should be right around here on the horizon line. So this building has a whole set of horizon lines or not horizon lines, but it has its own set of vanishing points that's independent from the big circle. The big circle, because it's angled differently than the square building, that has its own set of vanishing points. It's also a square, as I was showing with the ellipse. That's also a matter of just finding the square in space. And then you'd have the vertical lines for the windows. That could be the third vanishing point down here. It should be, if that's what you're going for. But it looks like they're also off. The blue vertical lines don't seem to align with the windows themselves and the window middles.
My focus was mainly the building and the other side.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Well, then none of this is needed in that case. This also isn't Brutalist. I don't think it is, but I don't know. Unless it is. But yeah, see the red here doesn't quite match up with the corners. We've got an off angle for it. The green it might be right, but these don't go to your vanishing points either. This goes off.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. The vanishing point is way farther down.
Okay.
Off campus.
Yeah, and from this angle, it's going to be pretty extreme. This would be a situation where I'd personally just do parallel. And I guess, yeah.
I feel like it was more challenging because it's cropped on the bottom of where the horizon line would be, I suppose. I figured the horizon line would be where that circle down would be instead of the building, because the building would go down below the horizon line. So I'm kind of assuming where the end of the circle building would be, where its ground is.
we can test this.
Yay.
So I'm just lining up all of the distinguishing features that are like linear.
It wasn't my photo. It was Jew's photo, but I have no clue where that image takes place.
That's fine. It's a building. You got it. So there's the first vanishing point for that building. Let's see. The second one's going to be so far out. So what we can do instead to find the horizon line, since we don't have that information, this vanishing point is going to be way the fuck over there. Instead, we're actually going to use the circle building, or at least this portion of it here, to find the horizon line. There's just a little bit of information here we can use. We're going to line up the tips of all these arches. Oh, and then where are we going to grab? We're going to use this little cut up here, I think. Yeah. It's still going to be pretty far off canvas, but let's move this, scoot this over. There we go. Barely, but that's good enough. So there is our horizon line. Just off the bottom of the canvas. You can kind of see it happening too here. Like here's a couple of shadows going down to that vanishing point as well. So you can see from those, kind of discern the angle is still pretty steep, so it makes sense that it'd still be like down there. But there you go, for this one at least.
Now, let's say you were going to continue that building downward. How would you construct that?
So depending on what you're asking, that kind of could get into fisheye lens a little bit, since we're getting
I don't think a fisheye lens is necessary, unless that image isn't warped for a fisheye lens.
So by fisheye lens, I just mean the effect. I don't mean like the literal lens
Okay.
being taken. There's yeah, all right. I'm gonna explain it. So let me explain it by picking up. Let's get a photo of. Nope, can't do photos while I'm streaming. So we've been over how perspective is kind of it's a lie. It's not. It's like the abstraction of reality. It's not actually reality. It's not how reality works. It's not how we perceive the world around us. So perfectly parallel lines like this. Say this is the horizon. Perfectly straight lines like this just don't exist in nature. The way our eyes work, given that they're lensed and they're kind of domed, over the iris, is we see things naturalistically kind of like bowed, and actually a lot like a fisheye lens, and the fisheye lens is really exaggerated. Let's say that's our horizon line. Everything's radiating out from it. Any lines that are going across our field of view are going to bow, and you're going to have our vanishing points, let's say out here, and then these lines are going to be like arched. But as far as the object goes, they are they are supposed to be the straight edges. So It's kind of like the profile of a box. And this isn't quite it yet, though, actually, because that that bowing effect also applies to the vertical. So we'll add a couple more vanishing points here. Now we're up to sort of kind of to a horizon line. This is not technically a horizon line, but so you have your horizon line, you have your view lines, then these also arch. So for the edges of this box here, I'm gonna aim for these corners. So yeah, it's barely missed. I'm gonna move it down here, so I'm cheating, but whatever. Need some of my own exercises, I think. It's tricky keeping track of two targets. So that's how objects get warped in fisheye lens. But this is how we actually see the world. If you're sitting in front of a wall, if you open up your field of view as wide as you can, and then find the corners of the room, maybe you're tracing the edge of the ceiling, you'll notice if, like, the more you turn your head down, keeping that spot in your peripheral view, you can actually start to see that bowing effect. This is also kind of like what happens with field of view in video games when you turn that slider and you crank it up and down. The camera is giving you more of that periphery view, and that's how you get like super weird distorted frames in some games. I know Planet Side 2 had that to a bizarre extreme, but anyway, so it's a lot to keep track of, fisheye lens stuff. So but at a certain point, depending on what you want to do, it kind of does become necessary. So if you want to continue this building down, we kind of have to talk about how like where the center of view is here, like and this line is gonna, the edge of that building is actually gonna start to bend downward, or in the opposite direction as it is right here. So kind of see it happening. Like that. And it'll be less extreme closer we get to the middle, that center vanishing point. But yeah. And then it would also apply to the top corners of the building and to any perpendicular edges here. So more than that. Yeah. If you just want to stick to 2-point perspective, then you just keep these lines vertical. Just keep them vertical, and then you're still adhering to the vanishing point here, just the ones you already have down. We're treating this one as being perpendicular. I need to keep my canvas a lot cleaner, so sorry. Actually, I can get rid of all these, I think. Yeah. That's much better. Then you add whatever details you want. I think we're going to add like a little entryway. Say it's like that big. I have another cube in here, so I can have that cube, and I get another center point. Do the vertical. Do the same thing over here. These are just squares in space. So, and this is a problem I run into a lot. I don't use fine enough lines, so I tend to really just like get super disorganized and messy. Erase some of this, actually, to help clean it up. There we go. It's easier to see. Let's just do a cutaway for an entrance. Just a cutaway. Very wide entrance, this. Whatever. I don't feel like making any more X's in the boxes. So. But. Let's say there's the dimensionality. I'm going to take away this pillar, actually. We don't need that center line confusing us. There you go. I need to redraw the rest of the building because I just erased it, but layering is your friend too in perspective, I would say, right? Like just busy work though at this point. I have everything I need. Sort of fill in the gaps. I don't know why I'm hatching there. Don't want to copy these, so we're gonna find them there. It's gonna be too much busy work, but does that answer your question?
Mm-hmm.
Getting pretty distorted down here, but like, yeah. I'm not very well practiced, so a lot of my stuff comes out pretty wonky. I'm a character artist after all. Alright. How is everyone feeling?
Tired.
Me too.
Absolutely fantastic.
Awesome. I'm glad for you.
Yeah, I feel hyped. I'm ready for this too.
You ready for this challenge?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, baby. Ready. Now that I have the right perspective, I'm ready, man. Ready.
What's the thingy that is a funny line thingy? I don't know what that. Completely spaced out from the lesson. I'm so sorry. I did kind of.
The star thingy.
All right. I think I'm gonna cut it here. At least the recording. Unless anyone has questions.
What I know about like dynamic perspective, like how you make sure, like if you're drawing a character leaping through the sky in like some like badass pose or whatever, how you keep that shit in perspective.
How do we keep people in
Well,
perspective?
yeah, like Tony Infant has this way of like drawing characters in perspective, especially like doing dynamic things. I can't really like wrap my head around it.
Sure. It's pretty simple. It's just the fact that like everything is composed of essential shapes. And actually, this is kind of we're gonna keep the recording going. So
sorry.
Like, everything in art is basically just either a cube, a cylinder, a pyramid, what other shapes are there? A sphere, a circle, whatevs.
A hexagon.
Cone.
A cone, yeah, just all these basic shapes.
Yeah.
All of them.
Primaries.
All of them have a means of being constructed in perspective. So, if you break down the human body, you're gonna find like cubes, cylinders, spheres. You might find a pyramid. I don't know. And if he's the little gnome, he's gonna have a cap. So, if you're drawing a figure in perspective, you just need the horizon line information, the perspective line information, and then you can start drawing, like, let's say, whoops, running ahead of myself. So, well, I mean, it's a flat torso, but here's the torso. And you get your head here, but and you get your arms, your arms here, like that, like so. And then there's spheres. So you don't have to be like perfect. Well, I guess like if your goal is to be perfect, then you just need to like hardcore study, son. I'm so sorry. But like you can start to get away with just like, yeah. Like freehanding a little bit of it. Knowing the theory in perspective does help with like freehanding and shit. So even if you don't want to do the grids for everything you ever do, understanding how they work is obviously going to help you quite a bit.
I'm trying to find
Millie, what was the artist you said you were thinking?
Tony Infant.
Huh.
There's a drawing he did, and he had guidelines drawn on him, not like in the perspective of like the environment. It was like just lines everywhere that led to a point on the person's body. I'm trying to find it right now.
How do you spell that?
Oh, okay. I think I found one. I found the image. I'll paste it in the chat.
Yeah, let's see it. Oh, see ya, Mer.
See what I'm talking about?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. He also had another example of how he has character like flying through the air, and he had just had lines with no horizon line just like out there on him, and it just made sense for some reason.
So it's a little, it's not a little, it's a fair bit ahead of like where I was kind of hoping we'd go with this particular challenge. You kind of just want to make sure that everyone's on the same essential frame, like foundation.
I'm sorry.
Figures might be more complicated than I haven't seen many brutalist figures. I take that back, actually. But yeah, I don't know a whole lot. Like, you want all of your things to, like, if you have a dramatic pose like that, where he's like standing really high above the viewer, and then you also have a portion that is below the viewer. You're gonna want to know where everything sort of lines up. So the knees are gonna line up like here if they're the same like angle, or even if not, they're gonna follow the same, like roughly the same area.
Oh, okay.
The shoulders are gonna adhere to or line up. So all the hard points on the body, those are where you're gonna wanna like look for. But since each part of the body is kind of its own basic shape, and these basic shapes can be in space in different directions and different rotations, then you could end up with like this kind of configuration where you've got like kind of a curve going on. So like the body itself isn't adhering to perspective like 100%, like all parts of it, but parts of it are, because they're kind of inflexible geometric objects when they're simplified.
Okay.
Sometimes that's not completely accurate. Like the rib cage does have some flex to it, very very small, but a little bit. and there's obviously like your midriff doesn't have too much like bone to it. It's meant to bend quite a bit, and so that's like an area of rotation. But yeah, muscles can be simplified down into basic shapes and shit like that. But I guess like it depends on how far you want to take it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it can be very simple, very succinct. Just using it for lining up my hands, making sure they're on the right, like they're both of the equal length. Like if one dropped arm with the hand here, the elbow is there, and then further along, let's say the horizon lines here, horizon line, say on the other side of the body, but it's a really dramatic pose, so they're like the perspective's really tight, so it's over here.
Mm-hmm.
So V1.
Could we clarify the assignment?
Yeah, one sec.
No problem.
So line up your hands and the wrists with the same like horizon line, and this is going to be where the elbow is, and there's going to be the arm, the shoulder up here.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, cool. Try that out.
I'm glad that came across. These figures look super sticky. All right, what's the summary of the challenge?
Yeah.
Summary of the challenge is up there in the pinned messages. We have our project, and boy is it going to be brutal, mainly because of our next 2-week run. We're going to be breaking down each of our favorite examples of brutalist architecture, dissecting its perspective information, recreating that building. It's okay if you don't get through the whole thing. Just push as far as you can. We'll try to help. Like reach out, wherever you get stuck. Without tracing, and then in week 2, so next week, we're going to actually either build one from scratch of our own design, or we're going to make changes to the one we've already drawn. So add a twist to it. Put like a second building on top of it or something. I don't know, a giant extrusion. Yeah, something new to the building, or you can create a wholly new one. And next weekend, we're all going to check in to see how everyone's doing, and see what we need to address before moving into the second week. Does that sound good? Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Sounds amazing.
Okay. Hey.
So there's no tracing the any architecture?
I want you to dissect. So tracing is a part of it, but you're tracing while like paying very close attention. You're tracing it based on its perspective information. Okay. That's what we're after. I don't care about like details, shadows. If you're just starting out, I'm going to be doing shadows, but
just break it down into basic forms.
Break it down into its basic forms. Get used to dealing with the mess that like dealing in perspective lines creates. Try to find good habits, like using layers and groups way better than I was in this presentation. But yeah, it's okay to trace. It's okay to use the shift thing. We are dissecting, not creating something original. That's the second week. Don't worry about that. And there's always going to be stuff that you can push, I think, in this stage of study, this breakdown stage. So even anyone who's feeling really confident and pretty advanced, I know there's stuff you can go back to this stage for and pick out. Just like I said, I keep saying I'm doing shadows. I've never done shadows before. They were a whole fucking monster. I'm gonna need to do some dissections like this in order to get a feel for how shadows are working. Right now, I think it's like a plane. So it's cutting. If you can picture a plane cutting across the 3-dimensional forms of everything. It's yeah. I don't know yet. I don't know, man. But yeah, you can't really run out of stuff to study at this stage.
Maybe really can't
get to a point where it's not as interesting as the stuff you were learning early on, or not as impactful, but yeah, there's no ceiling. I still don't think anyone has figured out how to draw a pentagram with perspective without the use of a compass. So if you do that, then you're better than every master I've ever known about. Perspective master, rather. Okay, if there are no more questions, any Brutalist buildings, right? Yes, any Brutalist buildings do look into, like, I would encourage you to look into Brutalism. Just, I have a couple sources up there. Just if interested, the wiki article and the video on the case for Brutalist architecture is like a nice jumping off point. But it can be any. I would like to see everyone doing Brutalism, specifically because they are so juicy for perspective study. Not a lot of super complicated organic shapes to confuse us in. You can definitely do organic shapes in perspective, but that's yeah. It's getting up there. It's nothing I haven't shown already though, like the 3 points thing. You just do that only with a grid. And know how to like copy it over and do a symmetric construction. But okay. Yeah, that's true. I'm sorry. If you want to do something funky and you can't stand Brutalism, then that's fine. I understand. Yeah. This is just just follow the thing. But okay. I'm gonna stop the recording. Which